I'm Jason Johnson in for Joy Reid, and we begin tonight with just a few hours left in the day. Donald Trump says is the deadline set by special counsel Jack Smith for the twice impeached, twice indicted former president to appear before the grand jury investigating his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. At least that's what he told us. It was in the target letter that he received over the weekend. But as far as we can tell, Trump has remained at his New Jersey golf club. But that should be no surprise. Today, the grand jury did hear from a former White House aide who now works for Trump's 2024 campaign. William Russell was with Trump for much of the day on January 6th. You can see him there on the ellipse beside Trump before the former president addressed the crowd. It is not Russell's first time appearing before the grand jury, begging the question why he was asked to return. Making it all the more interesting is the fact that Russell was never interviewed by the January 6th House Committee last summer. Remember that committee interviewed like more than 1,000 people, but somehow Russell was not on that list, and his name wasn't even mentioned in the committee's final report. There are still a lot of other questions surrounding this case, including when or if Trump will be indicted, and if he is, what's he going to get charged with? What we know at this point are there are 3 key statutes mentioned in the target letter that could guide charges against Trump. There are also the questions surrounding all the others involved in the efforts to try and overturn the election, who might be cooperating with the special counsel, and who else could find themselves facing charges. This is a lot, so I have a fantastic panel to start off tonight. Joining me now is Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney, University of Alabama professor, and MSNBC legal analyst. Michael Steele, former RNC chair, MSNBC political analyst, and host of the Man of Steel podcast, and Brian Tyler Cohen, host of the No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen podcast and an MSNBC contributor. Thank you all so much for starting us off. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Joyce, I'll start with this. I, like most of America, was riveted last summer by the January 6th hearings. It was one of the most highest rated things on TV, and I'm not being glib when I say that. It was amazing to see that kind of civic engagement from people across the United States. It is amazing to me that this William Russell guy was not included in anything last year, but Jack Smith has found them. Just from a legal standpoint, I mean, is he crossing a T and dotting an I we haven't seen before? Is there something that Jack Smith might have gotten access to that the January 6th committee couldn't? I'm just curious as to what the significance of this is from a legal standpoint, because I'm surprised that this guy was overlooked.
Well, we don't know for a fact that he was overlooked, Jason. It's really a curious situation. But federal prosecutors have a power that others don't. They have the subpoena power. And that means that throughout this process, Jack Smith has been able to obtain testimony from people he wants to hear from, and that the January 6th committee may not have had success with. It's very likely that along the way, prosecutors were doing as they do, asking who was there, what was said. And in the course of eliciting that information almost by rote repeatedly with witnesses, this name may have surfaced as someone that they need to talk to. The reporting is that he was at Trump's side throughout that day, and something that prosecutors will be looking for are casual comments made by the president in the course of the day. Did he acknowledge being aware that he had lost the election? Did he perhaps say that he was happy to see violence, that he hoped violence would help him hang on to the presidency? Lots of value in a witness like this if, and it's a big one here because he's represented by lawyers representing other people in Trump's inner circle, but if he will tell the truth, prosecutors could learn a lot of interesting information.
Michael Steele, you know, the more people who end up getting caught in this web, the more I think to myself, if I am a self-serving elected official, if I am a Republican, I am at least coming up with a plan B, right? Plan A is stay loyal to Trump, attach yourself to him like a barnacle. If he goes down, maybe you jump off at the last minute. But smart people have a plan B. You don't stay in politics 20, 30, 40 years without having a plan B. What is the plan B right now behind the scenes for Republicans if this goes left? If one of these 3 massive investigations against President Trump ends up convicting him and it's a really ugly charge, worse than anything we've seen before, what's the plan B behind the scenes?
Well, the plan B is that that's about it.
Plan B, B for bounce. I'm a bounce. I mean, I'm gonna just be out.
I just gave you plan B. We out. Drop the mic. Now, look, the bet is on Trump the bet has always been on Trump. The plan B started with DeSantis, but that plan B was developed and put in motion not by the base, but by the moneyed interest in the party, the high-end billion-dollar donors, the establishment that the base, quite frankly, has a beef with. Right? They are the reason they tacked to Trump back in 2016. So now for them to have a plan B that you think this base is going to go, okay, they got our guy, our Messiah, right? Our Moses, the man who's led us to the promised land, that they're just going to go, all right, we're just going to buy into your plan B. That's not how this is going to play out. This is ride or die for a lot of these folks, which is why you see the level of commitment that you have from the base. Yeah, you've got some of the principals now talking, but what are they actually saying? And are they more Weisselberg than they are Cohen, right? Are they going to, go down for Trump, or are they going to give up the goods on Trump? And so my bet is you're going to have less giving up of those goods by these individuals and more going down with Trump, which means that the party's got to roll in that direction and deal with the outcome should this thing come to a head before November of 2024, which a lot of us doubt it fully will. Right. And quite honestly, that's a big bet that the Trump team is making. We're all watching Judge Eileen in Florida for Cannon in Florida, for example. So there's a lot of road that gives these folks room not to necessarily have to go to a plan B, because plan A is working out so swimmingly.
Brian, so this is the thing that always gets me about this. We have these highfalutin conversations, right? We talk about, okay, indictments and Jack Smith and everything else like that. I'm a college professor at Morgan State University. When I talk to 18, 19-year-olds who live their entire lives on Instagram and TikTok, only some of this trickles down. I am fairly confident if I talk to a lot of Zoomers and young millennials I know, they don't even know who Jack Smith is. This is kind of your bailiwick. How much of this trickles down, right? How much of these sort of week in, week out details about these investigations are trickling down, and how's it being consumed by sort of younger viewers and Zoomers and things like that?
Yeah, I think the younger generations have a much higher proclivity to actually engage with this stuff than before. I mean, just with social media unto itself, we're able to consume so much more than we used to. I mean, how many kids, when even I was in school, were like picking up the newspaper to figure out what happened? But this stuff also impacts us. I mean, to claim that politics doesn't have a massive impact in our lives, with everything happening with abortion, with these don't say gay laws, with these LGBT bans, with interstate travel bans that are happening across that are happening in certain states. I mean, to claim that these things don't have a massive impact on young people's lives is just defying reality.
And here's the thing. I also think that you can get more interaction now, right? Like there was a time where it's like, hey, I'm going to write my congressman, and maybe he or she will write me back. But if I can scream at somebody directly on Twitter, or what's left of Twitter, or TikTok, there's actually a lot more interaction that a young voter can get today than in the past.
Yeah, they don't seem so, I guess, it doesn't seem like such a nebulous concept as it used to in the past. And a lot of these, especially younger Democratic congresspeople and senators, are very, very happy to engage and happy to interact with their constituents and just people online. I mean, they are, I guess that's the difference between what it used to be, is a lot of them are younger anyway, and they've grown up in this age of millennials and Gen Zs, and so this is just the new normal. Like, it shouldn't be this club, this elitist club where they don't have any interaction with people, because we're, at the end of the day, we're the people that have all the power.
Right, and the ones voting for him. It's funny, I remember back in my young intern days when it was like literally trying to get members of Congress to get emails was difficult. With that in mind, I want to play a little sound, Joyce, about what is actually going on with some of the other people who were heavily involved in this process, right? So we have, we have William Russell. We're also finding out things about Mark Meadows. So I want to play this sound from George Conway on Meadows. Get your thoughts on the other side.
I also think that the last possibility to me has always been the most intriguing, which is are there people who are cooperating? We've seen some very strange quietness from, for example, Mark Meadows. I mean, I just have the feeling something's going on there. I mean, he's someone who ought to be every bit as exposed as Donald Trump, yet he's been so quiet, and they're just It just seems like there's something up with him.
Joyce, I don't know if silence means guilt. I don't know if silence means he's trying to line up his life for a long time in jail in a jumpsuit. I don't know. But is there something to this? Is there something to the fact that one of the main conspirators, right, somebody who was intimately involved in the process, at least legally, of trying to overthrow the 2020 election, that he hasn't been on the talk circuit, that we haven't heard that much about it? We know he's testified, but other than that, he's been kind of quiet.
He's been awfully quiet, and I think George is an astute observer here. Look, Mark Meadows is someone who, in some ways, makes his living by promoting himself and his work, his book on television. It's surprising to have seen him go to radio silence. That's something that we often see with people who've struck a cooperation deal with the government. That's not the only conclusion that we could reach here. He could simply be trying to keep himself out of it with a low profile, knowing he does have considerable exposure. But the reality is that Mark Meadows was in the mix. He appeared to be the gatekeeper and the coordinator for much of the planning that went on in advance of January 6th. He would be a possible target, or at least a subject of the government's investigation. And if he has in fact agreed to cooperate with the government, he too would offer very high value. He's probably the most important cooperator that the government would be able to land because of his access, and not only his conversations with the former president, but his constant text messaging with all sorts of people, including a lot of the lawyers who've been identified as part of the fake slates of electors planning and the efforts to use the Justice Department to perpetuate the big lie and the notion that there was fraud in the election when there wasn't. So it's a very interesting absence from the public square with Mark Meadows.
Like to censor minority communities in America. They say they don't want woke ideology shoved down their throats. So they do things like cancel Bud Light for sending a can of beer to a transgender influencer, which led to Kid Rock shooting a case of the beer, even though he was still selling it in his bar. They canceled Target because it dared to sell Pride Month merchandise. And they outlawed drag queens because they don't like something that people have been doing for centuries. Now they're going after the new Barbie film, which folks over on Fox claim pushes, quote, toxic femininity and China. I kid you not. According to Senator Ted Cruz, Barbie is pro-China propaganda because of a crayon map depicted in the film.
I have not seen the movie. I've just seen the stupid map. This is really designed for the eyes of the Chinese censors, and they're trying to kiss up to the Chinese Communist Party because they want to make money selling the movie in China.
Canceling has become their thing, but don't dare say a peep about the new music video from country singer Jason Aldean, which says this: cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag, and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough. Got a gun that my granddad gave me. They say one day they're going to round up. Well, that stuff might fly in the city. Good luck. Try that in a small town. Music video shows Aldean interspiced with news clips of protests out of context. It promotes vigilantism and was filmed in front of the Maury County Courthouse in Columbia, Tennessee, the site of the 1946 Columbia Race Massacre and the 1927 mob lynching of an 18-year-old black teenager. I guess he doesn't know that because many conservatives are canceling Black History too. Joining me now to discuss is Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist and contributor to the Los Angeles Times, and Juanita Tolliver, MSNBC political analyst and co-host of Cricket Media's What a Day podcast. Kurt, I'm gonna start with you. You are my country music Sherpa. We went to the Academy of Country Music Awards earlier this year. This is your area. I think I was wearing the same blazer. Just put this in context here. Like, what is Jason Aldean talking about? I understand a sort of hokey, hey, small town life is different than the big city. I get that. That's a common thing in country music. But why are people so angry about it? And why is he getting so defensive, since it seemed like a pretty obvious dog whistle about what he wanted to talk about?
Well, Jason, I think number one, what he's talking about is this kind of conservative right-wing fantasy that everybody else is after them to take things from them. that you have to protect your quote unquote small town values because those big city coastal elites are going to try to take things from you. And the things that you see in big cities, whatever those are, they apparently don't happen in small towns. Now, let me just point out, just for the record, that I think Uvalde, Texas is a small town where a gun massacre happened. But be that as it may, that's the terminology, the vocabulary, and that culture war riff that we're seeing turned into melody and music. And it's designed to ultimately provoke a conversation, sell records, sell streams. And that's exactly what's going to happen, by the way. It's not an accident that within 24 hours of this controversy erupting, that this song and this music video were both #1 on iTunes.
And Juanita, here's the thing. I actually don't have a problem with music being controversial. I mean, that's what music is. That's what art is. It's not supposed to always be something that we like. But I think the concern that people who are criticizing the song are having is, look, we're now in a society where people take this kind of music and they act upon it. They feel galvanized by it. They feel that this is a rationale for vigilante violence. Is that something that we need to take into consideration, that maybe some of the people who are vigorously defending country music don't recognize it's not an attack on the genre? It's questions about the impact of this kind of music.
Not even questions. You've already drawn the through line, Jason. There's evidence that demonstrates that that's what happens. And so to reject that is to gaslight the rest of us, to pretend as though, oh, we're just making this up, we're imagining it. No, like you said, the history of the courthouse that he chose to film in front of, to play dumb about that in retrospect, is ridiculous. And all the Republicans backing him up are buying into that same reality of, okay, we're going to do racist things, we're going to do harmful things that target violence towards Black and brown people or anyone who's different from us, and then tell them that it's their fault. Right? That's the energy that comes through in this video, in this song. And let's be real, I knew something was up based on the title, Jason. Like, I know what a sundown town is. And so I was like, yeah, this ain't for me at all.
Now, Juanita, I'm going to stay with you for a second. I'm pointing this out, full disclosure. I have a Barbie doll. I have a 1983 black Barbie doll who is an astronaut. Before Mae Jemison, the doll was made before Mae Jemison was the first black woman in space. I've got to ask you, when you hear this controversy, Republicans saying, oh my gosh, we hate the Barbie movie, you know, Juanita, like, what does that say? Are they so bankrupt for ideas that they want to run after this doll? I mean, if you want to make the argument that maybe Barbie dolls are made in another country and they're not American enough, that's one thing. But the idea that Barbie is Chinese propaganda seems like a bankrupt party looking for a way to stay in the news.
Exactly right. This is a fight for relevance. And so what Ted Cruz is doing here is trying to latch on to the latest big cultural phenomenon moment to try to be relevant. But the reality is nobody likes Ted Cruz. And people definitely aren't going to like him for attacking Barbie. So he can move from Barbie to Big Bird to Bud Light. And Ted Cruz, we still don't like you.
Kurt, and this is the other part of this that sort of shocks me. I on my podcast, A Word, I'm going to talk about at the end of the show, I did this whole breakdown with talking about like the history of Black Barbie, the importance of these kinds of images to young people. When you see Republicans attacking, as Wendy mentioned, attacking Big Bird, attacking toys, attacking beloved cultural characters, doesn't it just make them seem out of touch? Doesn't it just make them seem like a bunch of stick in the muds when everybody else is trying to find something to do in the middle of the summer to brighten their days in the middle of 95-degree heat?
Yeah, because I also think that when you make these kind of attacks against toys and puppets, I think it leaves a lot of parents wondering, why are you spending so much time, energy, oxygen talking about these really superfluous things when at the same time we're worried to death that our kids aren't going to come home from school alive because they're going to get shot at today, and you have nothing to say about anything like that. You have nothing to do about making sure that we actually have a safe environment for our kids. It's so hilarious to watch these Republicans talk about being pro-life, talk about children and making sure that they have the right books and toys and cultural items, yet they don't want to lift a damn finger to do anything to keep them alive.
Kurt Bardella and Juanita Tolliver, thank you so much for joining us tonight on The Readout. If you'd like to learn more about Barbie, or you're just going to go see the movie this weekend, definitely check out my podcast, A Word with Jason Johnson, on Slate for more on the history of Barbie. I'm joined by Lajeria Davis, writer, producer, and creator of the new film Black Barbie, a documentary. It's really fun. I learned a lot. You'll definitely enjoy it.